plugging my demo in there. So I was trying to create some sort of forward links from Luciano's amazing talk into my talk, but I gave up in the end, thinking, well, mine just follows on from his. Okay, so good planning there, Herb. So I've been working. It's actually my parents told me that I've been interested in computers since I was 5, when I asked for a computer for Christmas. Sadly, I was disappointed. Back then, a computer would have been a room full of stuff, so it's probably a good job I didn't actually get it. But I got a remote control forklift truck instead, I remember, and a Ladybird book of computers, and that really sealed my fate. I've been working the Internet of Things, as we now call it, for quite a long time as well. My mum reminds me that when I was 8, I built a device that when she went and hung the washing out, she put this little sensor out, and then she ran a wire back to the kitchen, and when it started raining, rain fell on the sensor, and it made beep, and she knew it was time to go and get the washing in, because it was getting wet. So I've been doing IoT, Internet of Things, for a very long time. Herb mentioned our partnership with the Sunderland City Council and the Sunderland Software Centre. We've been working with them for a number of years now, encouraging innovation and promoting new enterprise in the region. I'm also a visiting professor at the University of Newcastle, so I've got quite strong links here. And my parents live in Morpeth, just up the road, so any excuse to come up here is a good chance to go and see them. Living on the Isle of Wight, that's quite a trek, so they're very grateful to the University of Newcastle for the fact that they invited me to be a visiting professor here. So quite a few years ago, I very literally took my work home with me and turned my house into a living laboratory, much to the annoyance of my family. But that enabled me to think about some of the things, some of which Luciano touched on, about the ethics and the privacy and I think I learned quite a lot of lessons of it. Just because you can do something doesn't necessarily mean you should. It's good to find out these things in the comfort of your own home rather than unleashing them on an unsuspecting public. So I wanted to share with you some of the experiments and some of the thoughts I've done and what these things have led to, just to give you a glimpse into what the Internet of Things is all about, what it probably means to your industry, what it means to your company, what it means to you. This is going to be a big deal in the future. And again, we're not heading towards a singularity here, although I felt slight pangs of guilt that I might be encouraging Luciano's doomsday vision, but I think we're pretty safe for quite a long time. So about 10 years ago, I started monitoring how much power my house used. I had to build my own sensor in those days. That's one of the big things that's changed for the Internet of Things, that we've crossed a tipping point where the devices that you can use, the Raspberry Pis, the Arduinos, the off-the-shelf sensors, are cheap and easy to plug together. And using software tools like Node-RED and Bluemix, you can lash these things together really quickly and come up with a if this, then that type scenario very quickly. So I put my energy usage online, as you do, and became fascinated by the graph. So this is the fridge kicking on and off. That's the shower. Those two are the dishwasher. Those two are the kettle. This one here is the dishwasher with its two twin towers. Each different appliance has its own unique profile, which I found quite fascinating. And I'm getting quite good at reading these graphs. It's quite difficult to get the computer to do it. Not so much when it looks like that, but when there's two things joined together. So what's happening there, for example? The other interesting thing is this graph never actually touches the x-axis. It's always a little bit above the line. This is the base load or the standby load of the house. It's the TVs on standby, the clock on the cooker, the computer's monitoring how much power the house is using. They're all using some power. And when I first started doing this, I had 3 laptops running various home automation experiments. I was burning 120 watts all the time. Now, there's a really interesting kind of convenient rule at the moment in the UK for UK energy prices. It's about £1 per watt per year. So if you've got a watt that's on for a whole year, that's £1. And there's a fair bit of tolerance in that, so it might be £1.05 or 95p. But so I was burning 120 quid a year running these 3 laptops. And I just had no idea. And it's quite shocking, actually. I mean, you go around your house, find out what things you're using. If you've got an Xbox 360 on standby, that's costing you about 30 quid a year doing absolutely nothing. So it's quite educational to go around your house, seeing what's on, putting a little energy monitor on to see how much it's using. I've now moved to Raspberry Pi, so I'm using 4 watts for each of those. Another really one that fascinated me was the microwaves. So the microwave oven has a little clock on it. On mine, it says 00:00, because I never bothered to set it. That takes 4 watts, so that's £4 a year it cost me. If you add up all the time I cook things in my microwave, the area under the curve, that's less than £4. So the biggest cost to me of running my microwave is the clock. Go home and turn your microwaves off, okay? Now, my family weren't as into these graphs as I was. Couldn't go, but they're 3/4 of the energy use in my house, so I had to get them involved as well. So I built this thing called the Ambient orb. This is a device inspired by David Rose, a guy from the MIT Media Lab who wrote this great book called Enchanted Objects. If you haven't read it, you really should. He talks about the enchantment of the Internet of Things. He talks about Tolkien's the Hobbit's orc sword, which glows and throbs when there's an orc nearby, and the big sharp pointy thing on the end is for killing it when you know it's there. David Rose's company sells an umbrella, which is got a little glass bead on the end of it, and you put it in the umbrella stand by the door, and as you go out to work in the morning, if it's flashing red, you take it with you because it's going to rain today. Genius. So he's added the enchantment to the umbrella to let you know when you need to use it. So this ambient device tells me red, amber, or green when we're using low, medium, or high energy. It flashes red when we're using loads and loads. And even my children have been known to pay attention to this. They'll say, why is the orb red, Dad? And we'll hunt around the house trying to find things to turn off, which can save us £3 or £4 overnight. So it's a really good thing to do. So that's much more, that sort of single pixel display, the ambient device, or glanceable displays as they call them, a very powerful medium. So I turned this last year into a schools project, which we wrote up with Tech Future Classroom, where we did what's called the Raspberry Pi and the Ping Pong Ball project, where we got an energy monitor connected to various things in the classroom, like lamps and fans and TV and so on. And then as you turn them on and off, you can see on the display how many watts they're using. Then the Raspberry Pi obligingly has this little multicolored LED that changes color using red, amber, or green. And you can log into the Raspberry Pi, and it's got some software called Node-RED where you can go in and change the programming very easily to change the thresholds. And I've actually got one of these here. Surprise, surprise. Here's what I made earlier. So this is what my friends on Twitter call the orb of awesomeness. Mainly because its main claim to fame is I have a lot of trouble getting it through airports. So, yesterday at Southampton Airport, they said, this looks a bit homemade, sir. Is there a law against that, officer? But they want to know what was inside it. But before, it's deliberately sealed for life. And when I get a 3D printer, I'm going to print a 3D case for it so it absolutely can't be opened. So all the over-the-air reprogramming stuff is all an example. So this is how much power my house is currently using. This is the orb. It's currently green. I can spice things up a bit by turning on my kettle. I have an e-kettle. Now, this is always a very dangerous thing to try. Don't try this at home. E-kettle. Okay, there's an appalling Wi-Fi. Okay, we have a signal. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to trigger this. Now, you have to imagine at my house now a servant waking up, or one of Luciano's robots, rushing down to the kitchen, getting the kettle, rushing to the sink, filling it up with water, going back to the kitchen, plugging it in, clicking the button, and hopefully, in a minute, it'll light up. But I can never quite talk for long enough to guarantee that it's going to light up while I'm doing that. I'll give it 5 more seconds and I'll carry on. Maybe not. Okay, well, maybe it'll obligingly do so in a minute the moment I turn my back. Damn, I hate demos. Okay, so not content with monitoring the whole house, I started monitoring individual bits of the house. So I put these little energy sensors all over every bit of wire I could find, and appliances and light level sensors and all kinds of things, and built an application called the Power Pi. This shows me the whole house, and then the highest hitting energy users. The biggest shock to me was actually the kitchen lights that used 8% of my electricity bill. These were rows and rows of lovely halogen spotlights that we have, which light the kitchen very nicely. I had no idea they were costing me £148 a year to light my kitchen. So I implemented a very simple low-tech fix. Last person out turns the lights off. And my parents used to say this to me when I was living at home. I could never work out why they kept nagging me about it, but now I understand. But the interesting thing was this gave me the data I needed to move to LED lighting. LED lighting is great. It uses only 10% of the electricity of incandescent light for the same number of lumens. And I've now, so the 300 odd quid it cost me to replace the LED bulbs, I knew would repay in less than 2 years. So the ROI is less than 2 years, which was 4 years ago. So now we're living in absolute luxury. We can leave the lights on as long as we like and can't possibly use as much electricity as we did before, which of course is one of the unfortunate spillover effects of LED lighting, that people just leave the lights on all the time because they know how little power it's using. Oh well. Anyway, go to LED, so as well as unplugging your microwaves, go to LED lighting as well. My house, as Herb mentioned, is also on Twitter. If you Google for the house that tweets, you'll get mine on the Isle of Wight, and there's also one in San Francisco, which by his own admission is a complete knockoff of mine. Luciano talked about the Turing test. I think there should be a Twitter Turing test. Can you tell whether this thing that's tweeting is a person or an object or a house? Now, I think it's fairly clear in my case. I haven't really made much effort, but compared with all the random raw data that's flying around in my house, this is actually quite a well-synthesized feed. You know, outside lights turned on rather than power wattage on this channel went up to 60 watts. When the phone rings, it picks up the caller ID off the phone line and DMs me on Twitter, sends me a text to tell me who's calling, so I can call my mate Jim back, and he says, "Oh, I just called your house." "I know, it told me." Which always freaks him out, so it's got to be done. It tweets about power usage and water usage, so every 5 pounds of electricity through the month, it tweets about that. So towards the end of the month, you can see whether you're getting near your direct debit limit, and a whole bunch of other stuff as well. So again, it's an ambient feed for background information about what's happening at my house. We talk in the Internet of Things about the 3 I's: instrumented, interconnected, intelligent. That's a really useful way of looking at the world. And with the sensors and things at this end, and sending the data back to the cloud where we do lots of analytics and processing, it's what you do with the data that's important. It's turning that raw data into actionable insights to know what to do. So to tell me now's a good time to run my washing machine, or don't plug your electric vehicle in now because the grid's in stress, or a whole bunch of other things. Or someone's calling your house. All these actionable insights tell me that something's happened that I need to do something about. And again, that gets us away from the autonomy of the things taking over the world in Luciano's dystopian vision, and that we actually remain in control because we're actually getting these useful insights. Of course, eventually we'll be taken out of the loop because the washing machine will just turn itself on when it knows that the grid is in favourable. You know, the wind's blowing, the sun's shining, and the power on the grid is cheap. So it's a good time to run the washing machine, and we'll have programmed it to do that. As well as monitoring things, I can also control things. So I've got a system called X10 that's a very old home automation system that sends messages around the wiring of the house to control things. So I can turn various things on and off. So I have the smartest towel rail on the planet. It looks in my diary and knows when I'm going to be away, knows what time when my first meeting is, and counts back to when I should be getting up in order to make sure the bathroom's warm at that time. Weekends and bank holidays, it comes on a bit later. So it's always sort of optimally warm in the bathroom when I have a shower, which is fantastic. Quality of life thing. I can also control, I think we do at Christmas, the Christmas lights, so that you can text the reindeer. You can text reindeer on to a special number at my house, and the reindeer lights come on, which is great. My neighbour loves to do it just to annoy me. He goes, now I understand what you do at IBM. That's really cool, yeah. But the point about this, apart from it just being really cool, is that if you've got the infrastructure in place in your house, you've got the Raspberry Pi and the Node-RED and the MQTT and all these other buzzwords, then adding this becomes an incremental cost rather than a build from scratch cost. If you'd give me some reindeer lights and a phone and said link them together, I'd go, oh man, that's going to be really hard. But now, this only took me about half an hour to do, most of which was wiring up the waterproof connector. The rest of it was just some reprogramming of some existing scripts already, so that was a really straightforward thing. And for every inventor has to invent a better mousetrap, and I indeed have invented a better mousetrap. I was actually getting some commercial interest in this yesterday in an email, so it's kind of, these things keep coming around. So this was actually 12 years ago, and you can tell by the primordialness of the sensing device. This is now a wireless system, battery-powered rather than the system, but essentially we monitor the mousetrap for when it's triggered, and when it does, it gets detected by this little box that generates a message called a mouse event. Pause for geeky laughter there, thank you very much. Actually, I spoke at EclipseCon in Germany last year. I got a round of applause at that point. That's pretty cool. But sorry, you shouldn't feel bad for not doing that. So just to show you how old this was my phone at the time, and this little smiley mouse here saying ready for action turns into a gravestone. And it said, mousetrap over your bedroom's gone off. So that's pretty cool. So this is remote asset monitoring. This is keeping the mousetraps running. So for someone like Rent-A-Kill, being able to actually get a text DM when the mousetrap goes off, rather than having to drive around them or checking them every time, is really improves customer service, but also saves a ton of diesel as well because you're not driving around all the time. So that's one of the examples of what the Internet of Things is all about. So that's stuff I've done at home, and I'm just going to quickly tell you about something I did in my local community, which was in a little village called Chale on the Isle of Wight. So it's called Chale Community Project. Very incredible bit of naming there. So this is a project helping people living in social housing, a lot of whom are in energy poverty, which means that you're spending more than 10% of your household income on energy. The houses were not particularly well insulated, and there's no gas on this side of the island. It's all electric heating. So there were quite sad stories of people getting very cold in the winter and not being able to heat the children's bedrooms, and pretty sad stories. So somebody had a great idea that if we could maybe use renewable energy and modern technologies to improve the energy behavior of these people, to hopefully let them spend less on energy and lift them out of energy poverty, to have a bit more to spend on other things. So the houses were retrofitted with air source heat pumps, double glazing, loft insulation, and solar panels. So the exam question was really, will they change their behavior to make use of the free electricity being made available from the sun on the solar panels in the middle of the day, or will they still run their washing machine at night, because they always have done? So we did this jointly with Surrey University. They have an environmental psychology group under Professor David Uzzell. They were doing the qualitative side of it, so they were asking the people what they thought they'd done differently. We were doing the quantitative side to see what they actually had done, which of course, and bringing those two was very interesting. So we fitted a kit of sensors to the house, which monitored whole house usage, PV generation, and some of the appliances. Then we sent that data back to IBM Smart Energy Cloud, put it into a big database for the university to use, and also built a portal so that the people could sit down with a green energy assessor and understand their graphs and find out when their immersion heater was on at dodgy times. And actually, fridges and freezers are quite an interesting thing. I've become obsessed, more than I should have done, with fridges and freezers. So a well-behaved fridge is off most of the time and just comes on occasionally. So it's called the duty cycle. It's a low duty cycle. So it just kicks on occasionally when the thermostat says the temperature's gone up, and it cools it back down again, like that. After a while, the compressor gets less efficient, so it has to be on for longer in order to keep the temperature down. So they get more like that, so they use more energy. In extremis, and this is one I've picked on one of my colleagues, I'm sure he won't mind me doing this, they're on most of the time, actually using loads and loads and loads of electricity. That one's costing him probably about 200 quid a year to run the freezer in his garage. If you're listening, Lawrence, you know who you are. So we've now got some advanced analytics software which analyzes all the fridges in this project and keeps an eye on them. So at the end of a week, if it's using on average more power than it did the week before, it sends you an email to say you might just want to check your fridge isn't kind of getting old and knackered, and might be a good time to go and buy a new one. Because there's a clear point. Remember the £1 per watt per year? The very first house we wired up on Chale Project had this beat-up old freezer in the garage, and it was on all the time, continuously, 175 watts, 175 quid a year. So I said, right, you go buy a new freezer from Curry's, 90 quid. Here's the cost of the kit. Right, the whole thing's paid for itself instantly. So that was pretty cool. One last example. This, to me, is the quintessence of the Internet of Things, bringing the Internet of Things to life. I live, as I mentioned, on the Isle of Wight. I live down here, and I drive to the ferry terminal in Cowes and get the Red Jet from Red Funnel up to Southampton, and then wherever I have to go after that, on the train usually. And traditionally, Red Funnel weren't particularly good at telling people when the ferries weren't running. Oh, by the way, I love the fog on the Tyne here. This is great. It segues nicely into my example, because when it's a foggy morning on the Solent, or when there's been a storm or high winds or something, they cancel the ferries, but they didn't used to tell people. There used to be this recorded hotline which you could ring up and say, it'll say, oh, all the ferries are running on time, which was true at 5 o'clock the night before when the guy who recorded it went away and left work, and he didn't get back till 9 o'clock the next morning. In between times, anything could happen and you wouldn't know. So I'm sitting there thinking, instrumented, interconnected, intelligent, maybe this Internet of Things stuff can help things. So I'm sitting there in Cowes with my laptop, my 3G dongle, thinking, better do that better than this. If only we could get some data about the position of the ferries. Now, luckily, that job was done for me by a thing called AIS, Automatic Identification System, which all the big boats have to have. And there's a lovely crowdsourced network of people who gather this data together and send it into a central database called Ship Plotter. And you could go to this database and pull out any rectangle of the world and see all the boats in it, which is really handy, particularly for Somali pirates. They do actually turn off the AIS when they go into Somali pirate land. They worked that one out. Anyway, behind this map is a big XML file with all the boats and all the positions and speeds and directions and so on. And so I pull it out. I pulled out all the ferries by name, Redjet 3, Redjet 4, Lady Pamela, White's. When you live on the Isle of Wight, you get to know all the ferries by name, believe me. And used a technique called geofencing, where you put a little circle around each ferry port, and then as the boat goes into that circle, you know it's leaving or arriving the ferry port. And I sent that feed over to Twitter. So each ferry route has its own Twitter feed. So you can see Redjet 3's arrived in Southampton, and you can see from the times if they're running late or not running at all, whatever. So this was absolutely solved my problem. You know, I could just glance at this on my phone, see if they're running late, not running at all, and plan my journeys much better. Loads of people were using this, hundreds of people were using it and tweeting how useful it was. But at this point, the ferry companies weren't at all involved. I'd nicked the ferry photos off their website, but that was about all. I did actually write to Red Funnel a couple of times and said, who did the twittering ferries? That's really useful. Hoping they'd write back and go, we don't know. And I could go, it was me. But they just ignored my email, so no, never mind. Anyway, one day, and it was April the 1st, I remember it well, I logged onto the website to check up some ferry times, and I saw this current live positions, Redjet 4's leaving West Cowes, Redjet 3's arriving Southampton. Oh, that's cool. They're doing the same thing as me. Wonder where their data came from. So I clicked through the link, and it went to my Twitter page. So what they were doing was actually pulling an RSS feed off Twitter, merging it live into their website, which was pretty cool, but I was a bit miffed because they hadn't kind of asked me or told me or anything. So because it was April the 1st, and because I could, I thought I'd play a little trick on them. So I logged into Twitter and injected Redjet 4's arrived in Milton Keynes. Which you'll know is not by the sea. You know, you can't get there by boat. I gave this talk in Madrid last week, and they went... Didn't react like you do, so I had to explain the geography lesson where Milton Keynes is. Anyway, so for the next hour, that became the official status of Redjet 4. You know, we blogged about it and tweeted it and got on local radio. It was all hilarious. Eventually, I felt a bit guilty and phoned Red Funnel and said, have you seen where Redjet 4 is? Yes, we've just noticed. I think we should meet. I think we should. So we met the next morning, and I was expected to be kind of told off for hacking into their system or something, but actually they said, no, this is great. We've been wanting to get into social media for a long time. We didn't quite know what it was about. You've walked into the ready-made system. Can we buy it, please? So this was the easiest sale in IBM's history. I think their lack of experience in social media is evidenced by the fact they didn't know how to contact me. So you could have tweeted me. Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. So that just shows. Anyway, so this is now running in Red Funnel's data center in Southampton. The disaster recovery site in the event of a failure is actually a Raspberry Pi in my study, but don't tell them that. Oh, there's a live feed, isn't it? Okay, never mind. Anyway, that one's out. Anyway, so the point is that Red Funnel's now gone for social media, hook, line, and sinker. They've got mobile websites showing where the ferries are. There are little screens up in the terminal showing you the position of the boats. But more than anything, the staff engage with you on social media. So you can tweet them and say, oh, when's the last ferry tonight? Or is the wind affecting the ferries? And they'll tweet back to you and tell you. So this automated system, the Internet of Things application to their ferries, has got them to engage on social media. And they've dramatically improved their service to their customers, me, the commuter, and thousands of people like me, in getting across the Solent. So this has given them significant competitive advantage over Whitelink, who haven't quite got this yet. And you know, to me, that's the quintessence of the Internet of Things. It's doing something better for your customers so they have a better experience. You gain competitive advantage. You can deliver your service more effectively. You can do it in a lower carbon way. All the things you're trying to optimize. That's what it's all about. Thank you very much.